one of the tragedies of this situation in Australia, particularly over the course of the last decade and a half, is that there has been a bipartisan approach in lots of ways to refugees and asylum seekers, but it's been to punish them rather than protect them. In an ideal world, in a normal reality, the need to protect people, fundamentally, that we are committed to in our signing of the Refugee Convention, supported by both sides of politics, should mean that it rises above the partisan political debate of an issue that gets kicked around like a political football. But sadly, that's the situation we're facing in Australia. It should be above party politics, but at the moment it's not. And so we've had this continual race to the bottom to see who can be the toughest upon some of the world's most vulnerable people, which has left us exposed compared to comparable nations around the world. Australia detains people who are innocent. The government label them illegal. They're not illegal. They've committed no crime. And we've even taken to incarcerating children, all for a domestic political gain. This notion that you've got to be cruel to be kind is a fallacy. It's just been cruel and it's got to stop. It's running, roughshod over our human rights obligations. Now, what's that doing to the character of the country? I think in years to come, there'll be a price to be paid for this. Compassion for people is not a form of weakness, and yet it's been portrayed publicly here as, we can bash up those who escape from the Taliban and then treat them like they were or are the Taliban. I would say, at some stage in the next 30 years, a Prime Minister will rise in the National Parliament and will offer an apology to the children and families of the asylum seekers to whom we are being so cruel today. See, this notion of the term queue jumper, according to the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, is only ever heard of in Australia. It's not used anywhere else because simply there isn't a queue. It's not known by most people who use that language that for someone to register as an asylum seeker, they have to leave their own country of origin. You can't get on a queue in Afghanistan. You have to leave the country. And that often means you have to leave the country in a very dangerous manner, often without papers. So this notion of a queue is purely in the mind of people like Sydney shock radio personalities and the Murdoch press. There isn't a queue. It's not that simple. At the moment, the United Nations is responsible for up to 52 million people who were displaced around the world, about over 11 million in camps. This notion of an orderly queue is crazy. The fact that a queue is something you see out the front of a British bus stop or a British news agency when people queue up to get to the front of their queue. And the logical thing is that if I stand on the end of a queue, I'm going to get to the front of it. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that at all. Basically, what people get rather than a space in a queue is a ticket in a lottery, because only 1% of the people who are displaced get resettled. You see, language is, and the language we use here is like bullets. And language like that demeans the people, takes away their humanity, and makes them therefore more easy to punish.